My name is Richard Seroder, and welcome to this second module in a course about Platform as a Service and using Cloud Foundry for building and deploying applications. In this module, we're actually going to get down and dirty with configuring apps, deploying them, monitoring them, and administering them in Cloud Foundry. Specifically, we're going to talk about Cloud Foundry spaces. How do you log in? What are the parameters? What's the difference between an organization and a space? We'll talk about application services and how do you provision those? How do you create service instances? And we'll do that. We'll then actually deploy and explore an application. We'll go ahead and take our reference architecture and push that out to Cloud Foundry so we can work with it. We're going to scale and update applications that we've deployed and look at the settings for that. Then we'll talk about troubleshooting applications. How do you handle the inevitable problems that will come up as you deploy or manage or scale or application-specific errors? How do you dig into that when you're dealing with an off-site sort of application fabric that doesn't necessarily give you the same sort of hooks you might be used to? Now, I'm actually going to break this up into two kind of part 1 and part 2 modules just so this isn't one mega module. So this first one's going to focus more on the spaces, the servicing, kind of setting up for deployment. And the second piece will handle the deployment and scaling, kind of keep your brain from melting all in one phase. Thought that split this up into two for you. If we look at the reference architecture for this course, we talked about this in the last module, but we're going to be making a donation application, very simple, but really the point was showing multiple layers where we have a web tier in Ruby on Rails, we have a JavaScript Node.js tier for API, and we have an external MongoDB service that's going to provide our persistent backing store for donation information. So let's talk about Cloud Foundry spaces. So first, we'll talk about organization, spaces, roles, permissions. Let's cover a little bit of this. So any sort of Cloud Foundry environment is going to have multiple organizations. An organization consists of users. They're grouped together for management purposes, right? It's a way to collect things together. All members of an organization share a resource quota plan, the availability of services in their marketplace, any sort of custom domains that they might want to apply. For example, you could have Seroder.com tied to an organization or a specific resource quota plan. As you look at an organization, it consists of space or spaces. Every application and service is scoped to a space. So organizations have at least one space. You have a default one when you've created your sample environment and the pivotal environment. But space provides a set of users that have access to spaces, that shared location for application development or management. And each space role applies to a particular space. So I can be a user that might span spaces and have different roles in each one. And speaking of roles, and we'll talk a little more about this in a moment, a user can have one or more roles assigned to them. The combination, the aggregate of these roles defines your whole set of permissions. So I can be an organization manager, an auditor, a space manager, a space auditor, or a space developer. Within a particular space, that's where I deploy applications. So applications get scoped to a space, which is scoped to an organization, and roles can be assigned on a space-by-space basis. Let's talk a little bit about the roles available to you in a Cloud Foundry environment. The organization roles, there's two that matter. There's organization manager, so you're going to assign this to a manager, a sort of person who has to administer the whole organization. I'm adding and managing users, I'm viewing quotas, I'm adding and creating spaces, I'm inviting people to spaces. I can see what's the applications in the space and look at the instances and so forth. So that's really a big picture administrator, probably not many people in an org with that role. The organization auditor, the org auditor, is for people who need to view but not really edit or change anything in there. They want to view the quota, they want to view users and roles, so really just an oversight position. When we look at space roles, you have things like a space manager. So these are people who have to administer the space, add users to a space, view the status or the instance counts or how many services are in a space. The space developer is a little different. This one is somebody who's going to be doing active development, right? They need to manage the apps in there. They have to deploy an app or stop and start them, rename them, maybe even delete it, create and add and view services in the space that they want to bind to their application. And then you have the space auditor, very much like the organization auditor. This is somebody who's just going to view but not edit. They want to view the status of things in the space, the apps, the number of instances, what resources are being consumed by each. So you're going to look across your organization and find what role do people need at the org level, and then on a space-by-space basis, which ones make sense for each person in the team. So for this first demo, what we're going to do is log into our space using the command line interface. Then we'll follow that up by doing it in the user interface in the Pivotal site. But this first demo is focused on setting a target, authenticating, viewing the details of my space, and even switching spaces.